Right now, your mind may be trapped in the restless, circular labor of mentally scrubbing the glass of your own life, desperately trying to wipe away the smudges of yesterday's choices. You feel this persistent, aching itch to examine every action, every word, and every perceived inadequacy, as if the right amount of internal scrutiny could finally reveal a version of yourself that is beyond reproach. Perhaps you have spent the entire day, and many days before this, peering through a window that seems permanently veiled by the condensation of your own overthinking. You are exhausted, not because the day was insurmountable, but because you have been using the dry, fraying cloth of self-judgment to polish away the natural humidity of being human. You fear that if you stop wiping the glass for even a moment, the world will see a person who is dim, unfinished, or fundamentally unclear. The room where you are currently resting is cool, and the air carries a faint, grounding scent of cedarwood, a neutral, quiet environment that demands absolutely no view from you. Feel the way the fabric of the sheets brushes against your skin, a steady, simple sensation that requires no interpretation. There is a stillness in this space, but it is not the empty, pressurized silence of an observation tower where you feel you must monitor everything. It is a soft, deep repose where the windows can remain fogged and the outside world can remain muffled. You are safe here. You do not need to observe yourself. You do not need to clarify your motives or justify your existence to the shadows on the walls. You are allowed to be the window that is simply resting in the damp evening air. Maybe you came here because you are weary of the friction. You have been told by the internal chorus of critical voices that a mind that isn't constantly analyzing itself is a mind that is slipping into disorder. You have been taught that if you aren't actively monitoring your flaws, you will somehow cease to grow, or perhaps you will be revealed as hollow. But tonight, we are going to explore a different understanding. You are not broken because your mind insists on reviewing the day's events, like a film that cannot be paused. What you are experiencing is not a sign of failure or a lack of spiritual discipline. It is simply the exhaustion of trying to view the world through a glass that you are convinced must be perfectly transparent all the time. The paradox of our journey tonight is this. You believe that if you just scrutinize your pain, your mistakes, or your social standing with enough precision, you will finally achieve the clarity you crave. Yet, the very act of constant self-scrutiny is what creates the mist. The warmth of your concern and the humidity of your fear are what fog the glass. We often assume that peace is the reward for having finally solved the problem of our own personality. But peace is not something you gain by scrubbing the glass until you disappear. It is the relief that comes when you realize the window was never meant to be the focus of your life. Tonight, we will not force the mind to be silent. If thoughts arise, and they will, like quiet gray clouds gathering against the pain, we will not try to wipe them away with the harsh, dry cloth of willpower. We will let them be. We will not try to defeat your tendency to overanalyze. We will learn how to set the cloth down and allow the view to reveal itself, or remain hidden, entirely on its own terms. If it feels right, take a slow, unhurried breath. Feel the air as it moves into the lungs, noticing how the body knows exactly how to receive it, without you having to guide the process. You have been trying to manage so much for so long. Your mind has been a dedicated custodian, patrolling the tower, constantly checking the glass, and fearing the moment the view becomes obscured. But notice how your shoulders drop a fraction of an inch when you finally decide that for these next few hours, you are not responsible for the clarity of the horizon. You are allowed to be fogged. You are allowed to be obscured. There is a deep, quiet integrity in simply existing as the structure that houses the window, letting the weather move through your awareness without the friction of your own interference. In a little while, we will look at the story of a hermit who lived in a tower overlooking a valley, who spent his entire life trying to polish his window until he could see the perfect, unblemished truth, only to realize that the glass was not the place to search. But for now, just settle into the reality of your own body, the weight of the linens, and the slow, rhythmic pulse of the night. You do not have to solve your whole life tonight. You only have to exist within the quiet, dim space you have carved out for yourself. Everything you have been carrying, the need to justify your actions, the replay of what you said or didn't say, The sharp edge of self-correction, it can all be set down here. Imagine placing that coarse, dry cloth on a stone floor beside you, like a tool that has grown too taxing to hold. You don't need to throw it away. You don't need to destroy it. You simply need to let your hand go limp and let it fall. It is a profound act of courage to stop the polishing, to step away from the glass, and to simply inhabit the room as a breathing, human being. Feel the sensation of your jaw softening, the teeth parting just slightly. Feel the space behind your eyes becoming wider, less focused on the sharp lines of your perceived shortcomings. You are not being asked to believe anything or to strive for a new level of perfect insight. You are only being invited to rest in the place where your worthiness is not tied to the clarity of your own perspective. As we move deeper into this stillness, let the expectation of a transparent version of yourself dissolve into the corners of the room. You are exactly as you need to be to begin this rest. The clarity is not something you create through relentless wiping. It is something you encounter when you finally stop trying to see through yourself. And right now, you are already halfway home, in a province where the valleys were often filled with a thick, clinging gray mist. There lived a stone scrubber named Jiro. He was not a stonecutter. He did not shape the rocks or build walls. His life was dedicated to a single, peculiar task at a remote mountain monastery. He was responsible for keeping the stone observation windows of the high tower perfectly clear. Jiro believed that the wisdom of the masters could only be received if the glass remained pristine. Every day, from the earliest light of dawn until the stars began to prick the velvet sky, Jiro climbed the winding stone stairs with his coarse, dry cloth, scrubbing away the condensation that formed on the panes. He lived with a quiet, persistent agony. He believed he was fundamentally unclear. Jiro had convinced himself that if he could just see the world through a perfectly transparent pane, he would finally understand his own life, his own purpose, and his own worthiness. He spent his hours looking for the slightest smear, the faintest fog of humidity, the smallest speck of dust. If he found one, he would work himself into a frantic, trembling state, wiping and rewiping until his hands grew raw and his fingers bled. He was so focused on the window that he never truly saw the valley below. He was so obsessed with the clarity of the glass that he had forgotten what it felt like to simply stand in the room and breathe. One afternoon, the monastery's elder, a man who walked with the heavy, unhurried gait of a slow-moving river, entered the observation tower. The elder did not look out at the valley. He did not ask Jiro how the glass was faring, or if the view was becoming any clearer. He simply watched the young man's hands, which were moving with a desperate, jerky rhythm. Jiro was currently scouring a patch of glass that was already perfectly clean, but his mind insisted that it was still clouded. His face was set in a mask of rigid concentration, his jaw locked tight against the fear of missing a flaw. The elder reached into the folds of his robe and pulled out a small, plain wooden frame. It was empty. It contained no glass, no pane, no surface to be scrubbed. He stepped toward Jiro and, with a silent, firm motion, placed the frame against the window. He moved it slowly, letting the frame surround a patch of the glass. Jiro had just finished polishing then. The elder did something that stopped Jiro's heart. He reached up, took the dry, frayed cloth from Jiro's hand, and dropped it out the open door of the tower. Jiro gasped. He felt as if he had lost his very soul. Without the cloth, what was he? How would he ensure that the world remained understandable? He looked at the elder, his eyes wide and burning with a frantic, unvoiced question. The elder simply gestured to the empty wooden frame now resting against the window. He pointed at the space inside the frame, and then at the space outside the frame, alternating his finger back and forth. Then he looked at Jiro and whispered, "The glass is what you are holding on to, but the view is what you are trying to find. Why do you struggle with the glass when the light is already here?" Jiro stood frozen. The tower was silent, save for the low, haunting whistle of the wind against the stone walls. For the first time in years, he did not reach for the cloth. He did not look for a smear. He looked through the empty wooden frame. He saw the valley, muffled by the soft, rolling mist, and he realized that the mist was not a failure of the glass. The mist was simply the nature of the valley. It was beautiful, heavy and vast. By trying to wipe the glass, he had been trying to deny the very nature of the world he lived in. He had been trying to scrub away the humidity of life itself. hoping that by doing so he would finally reach a state of absolute, sterile perfection. But the light was already moving through the mist. The mountain peaks were already present. Whether he saw them clearly or not, his struggle, his constant agonizing review of his own transparency, had been a wall between him and the very reality he was trying to understand. The elder picked up the wooden frame, placed it gently in Jiro's hands, and walked back down the winding stone stairs, leaving the tower to the soft, muffled hum of the evening. Jiro did not immediately find peace. He felt a profound, aching vulnerability. He stood there for a long time, his hands trembling as he held the empty frame. He felt the phantom urge to start scrubbing again, the old habit of self-scrutiny clawing at his mind, telling him that he was failing, that he was becoming lazy, that he was losing his way. But the cloth was gone. The tower was cold and the air was damp. He leaned his forehead against the window, not to look through it, but simply to feel the cool, solid reality of the stone and glass against his skin. He stopped trying to see. He stopped trying to fix the view. He listened to the condensation dripping down the panes, a slow, irregular rhythm of liquid tapping against stone. It was not a sound of chaos. It was the sound of the evening settling into itself. Jiro found himself breathing in time with the drips. Drop, pause, drop, pause. He realized that he had spent his life treating his own consciousness as a dirty lens. He had been so busy reviewing his own reflections, so concerned with how clear his life looked, that he had never once realized that the light he was looking for was the light that was already behind him, moving through the tower. His need to be clear was a way of separating himself from the world, a way of building a private, controlled reality where he could finally feel safe. But safety had never been in the glass. Safety was in the act of being present, right here, in the dim tower, among the mist and the rising night. Jiro moved away from the window and sat on the floor. He did not look at the valley. He did not try to judge his day or his effort. He simply sat. He felt the stone floor beneath him solid, unchanging, and entirely indifferent to his obsession with cleanliness. He was a stone scrubber who was no longer scrubbing. And in that cessation he found a strange, terrifying, and wonderful freedom. The world was still obscured, the mist was still thick, but the frantic tightening knot in his chest had finally begun to loosen. He was not a failure for feeling the mist. He was simply a man, and the night was finally arriving to hold the rest. The tower grew darker, the light fading into a soft, charcoal gray. Jiro didn't light a candle. He didn't want to see more. He wanted to be still, to let the boundaries of his self-scrutiny dissolve into the quiet of the mountain. He understood now that the cloth had been his prison, and that the emptiness of the frame was his only true home. As the wind continued to hum against the tower, he closed his eyes. The need to see clearly, the need to polish the self, the need to justify his existence, it all fell away, leaving behind a silence that was wide, clear, and unexpectedly kind. He was no longer the custodian of the view. He was the valley itself, patient, damp, and waiting for the morning light to reveal exactly as much as it needed to, and not a drop more. The sight of Jiro's coarse cloth falling into the mountain mist is not an invitation for you to abandon the necessary structures of your life, nor is it a request for you to become indifferent to the quality of your own days. Often when we encounter the wisdom of letting go, we interpret it as a call to lose our grip on everything, to become like a hollow shell that feels nothing and cares for no one. But that is a misunderstanding born of exhaustion. The elder in the tower did not tell Jiro that his work was worthless, nor did he tell him that the window was a lie. He simply showed him that the effort of wiping was not the source of his vision. The weariness you feel, the constant, grinding labor of polishing the glass of your own personality, is not because you are flawed or because you have failed to reach a state of perfect clarity. It is because you have mistakenly identified your consciousness with the glass that needs cleaning. You believe that if you can just scrub away the smudge of a past regret, the smear of a social anxiety, or the fog of your own uncertainty, you will finally deserve to see the world with confidence. But this is the trap of self-scrutiny. The more you focus on the glass, the less you see the valley. The more you focus on the smudge, the more you become convinced that you are the smudge. This is the central difficulty of the human heart. We try to fix our lives by constantly examining them from the outside, as if we were objects to be refined. We look at our thoughts as though they were defects in the glass, and we set to work with the rough cloth of self-correction, hoping that if we are harsh enough, we will finally shine. But your awareness is not a surface to be maintained. It is the deep, quiet capacity to hold whatever is currently appearing. When you are caught in the loop of reviewing your day or worrying about your next move, you are not failing to be enlightened. You are simply caught in a cycle of trying to master the weather from inside the tower. Consider the nature of the first wound. It is the simple, honest experience of living. It is the tiredness that comes after you have spoken your mind, the vulnerability that arises when you are seen, or the quiet ache of uncertainty when the future feels like a valley filled with fog. This first wound is inevitable. It is part of the territory of being human. It happens, and it is uncomfortable, but it is also finite. It arrives, it occupies a moment, and it passes away. Just as the clouds move across the mountain peaks, you cannot command the mist to disappear, and you do not need to apologize for the fact that the mist exists. The suffering, the deep, restless, sleepless misery is what your mind adds to the first wound. It is the second wound. It is the internal voice that says, "You shouldn't feel this way," or "If you were truly wise, this would be clear to you," or "This mist proves that you are fundamentally unclear." When you add that layer of judgment, you are not cleaning the glass, you are simply scratching it. You are taking the natural, passing experience of being tired or confused, and you are branding it as a personal defect. That is the labor that exhausts you. That is why your hands feel raw and your heart feels weary. You are not fighting the world, you are fighting the natural humidity of your own being. Buddhist wisdom asks us to stop adding that second wound. It does not ask us to stop feeling the cold or to deny that the valley is obscured. It asks us to stop beating the glass. Imagine if, instead of reaching for the cloth when the fog appeared, you simply acknowledged the fog. You could say, "Ah, the mist is here. The view is obscured. That is the weather of this moment." There is no judgment in that. There is no urgency to fix it. There is only the quiet, steady recognition of what is true. In that moment of acknowledgement, you are no longer the one scrubbing the glass, you are the one inhabiting the room. You have moved from the labor of a servant to the presence of a host. This shift changes the way you relate to difficulty. Peace is not found in a view that is permanently pristine. It is found in the ability to stand in the tower, while the mist swirls around you and remain undisturbed. When you stop demanding that your mind be a perfectly clear window, you stop the frantic pace of the internal audit. You stop trying to manage the atmosphere of your own heart and start allowing yourself to be the space that hosts it. This is a much quieter existence. It is a way of living that requires far less effort, yet it brings a much deeper sense of stability. When you notice that you are replaying a conversation or analyzing your own behavior, do not try to wipe the thought away with a harsh, mental cloth that only makes the smudge feel more permanent. Instead, observe the urge. Notice the way your mind immediately reaches for the correction, the way it feels the need to justify itself. Just name the process. This is the habit of scrutiny. That act of naming creates a vital, sacred distance. You are no longer the one who is frantically wiping. You are the one who is watching the frantic wiping happen. And in that distance, the anxiety loses its power to command you. It becomes just another event in the room, like the sound of the wind or the drip of the condensation. You are not broken because you want clarity. You are simply human, and you have been taught to look in the wrong place for it. You have been looking at the glass, hoping to see a version of yourself that is worthy of rest. But your worth is not in the glass. It is in the light that is already moving through the tower. It is in the fact that you are here, breathing, experiencing, and participating in the unfolding of the night. You do not need to be a finished product to be worthy of peace. You don't need to have a clear view of your future to be allowed to sit in the quiet. If your mind is currently clouded, let it be clouded. You are not failing the practice of sleep. You are just experiencing the weather of your own consciousness. There is a deep underlying intelligence in the body that knows how to drift into rest without you having to guide it. You have spent your energy trying to oversee the process, trying to ensure that the mind stays clear and the thoughts stay orderly. But the body is already beginning to surrender. You can feel the tension in the chest beginning to ebb. the way the breath is finding a deeper, more natural rhythm. You are moving toward the center of the room, away from the window, away from the view toward the warmth that exists in the heart of your own being. This journey is gentle. It does not demand that you shed your past in one night. It only asks that you notice when you are reaching for the cloth. And each time you notice, each time you choose to set the cloth aside, you are planting a seed of something new. You are practicing the art of non-doing. You are learning that the most powerful thing you can do for your own peace is to stop trying to solve the problem of your own personality. You are not a problem to be solved. You are a life to be lived. And right now, the only living you need to do is the simple, rhythmic act of breathing into the dark. Everything you are holding, the questions about who you are, the concerns about your direction, the lingering echoes of the day's interactions, they are all resting in the room with you. But they are not your burden to carry. They are simply part of the architecture of this moment. You can let them be. You can let the mist settle where it will. You don't need to wipe it away to be safe. You don't need to see through it to be at home. You are already in the tower. You are already sheltered. And the light, the deep, ancient light of your own presence is already shining through, regardless of how much you try to manage the view. As you continue to listen, try to let go of the need to understand every word. Let the sound of the voice be like the drip of the condensation against the stone, rhythmic, steady, and soothing. You don't need to follow the thread of the teaching, you only need to feel the space it is creating. The teaching is not meant to be a lecture to be learned, it is meant to be a room to be entered. And you are already inside. You are already in the quiet. Let the thoughts settle as they may. Let the mist hover where it will. And know that beneath the surface of all this movement, there is a core of your being that remains perfectly clear, perfectly still, and perfectly content to simply be. This is the truth you are returning to, and it is a truth that requires nothing from you but your surrender to the rest that is already calling your name. If it feels right, allow your focus to drift away from the world of people and expectations, turning instead toward the quiet architecture of your own breath. You have spent your entire day negotiating with the demands of others, adjusting your presence to fit the shape of the room you were in, and laboring to keep your heavy, ornate cloak fastened tight against the cold of social judgment. Now we are simply going to turn the wheel of your attention inward. There is no one to impress here. There is no standard of composure to uphold. You are allowed to be exactly as you are, a person who is tired of the performance, a person who is ready to stand unadorned in the quiet. Take a slow, unhurried inhalation. Feel the way the lungs expand and contract, a natural, rhythmic movement that requires no effort from you. There is no social grace required for this breath. It does not need to be refined or polished. Feel the weight of your body settling into the mattress. If your shoulders are still holding the memory of a social encounter, or if your jaw is clenched from the effort of maintaining an expression of warmth, imagine them loosening, just a fraction of an inch, as if they are finally sliding out of the stiff, heavy wool that has been pressing against your skin for hours. You do not need to let go of everything at once. You only need to acknowledge that for these next few moments, the work of presenting yourself can pause. Now, invite one of the thoughts that has been circling in your mind to come forward. Perhaps it is a worry about how you were perceived today, or a regret over a sentence that felt forced, or a lingering fear that you are somehow not enough when the cloak is off. Do not try to push it away. Do not try to analyze it or justify it. Simply hold it in your awareness, as if you are looking at the heavy, intricate silver brooch that once held your cloak in place. Notice its texture. Is it sharp? Is it cold? Is it familiar? A piece of your own history that you keep returning to, hoping to find a way to make it sparkle more brightly. Instead of trying to force this thought into a shape that satisfies your need for approval, imagine that there is a wide, shallow pool of cool, clear water resting on the floor in front of you. This pool is not a judge. It does not demand that you explain yourself. It is simply a place of containment. If it feels right, visualize yourself unclasping that brooch, that specific, persistent worry, and letting it drop into the water. Watch as it sinks through the surface, breaking the reflection of the room, and rests at the bottom. You do not need to change the shape of the worry. You only need to change your relationship to it. It no longer belongs to your throat. It no longer belongs to your identity. It belongs to the stillness of the water. Notice what happens when you stop holding that brooch in your hand. You might feel a brief, phantom pull, a sudden impulse to reach back into the water and try to retrieve it, to polish it, to ensure it doesn't tarnish. This is a common response. It is the merchant's reflex, the fear that if we are not actively guarding our public image, we will lose ourselves. But observe this impulse. Watch it arise. Notice the tightness it creates in your palm. And then as you exhale, let that impulse settle. You do not have to be the one who ensures your own reputation is flawless. You can trust the silence to do the work of softening. Perhaps another concern drifts forward, a fear that you will be seen as lazy if you rest, or that you will lose your way if you aren't constantly adjusting your appearance to fit the crowd. Treat this concern with the same quiet curiosity. Place it into the pool alongside the first. Do not judge the thought as bad or good. It is simply another fragment of your experience, a stray silver thread that you are finally deciding you don't need to sew back into your heart. As you watch it sink, notice if the room feels any quieter, or if the space around your chest feels a little more expansive. You may find that some thoughts are harder to let go of than others. Some might feel heavy, like the coarse wool of your winter cloak. If you find yourself hesitating, that is perfectly fine. You do not need to force this. You can simply sit with the thought for a moment, acknowledging its presence without interacting with it. You can imagine the air in the room flowing around you and around the thought, like a gentle breeze moving through an open courtyard. The thought is not a command, it is an event. It is an occurrence, like the shifting of light across a floor. It has no authority over your worth. In this moment of practice, there is no need to achieve a state of perfect stillness. If your mind wanders, and it surely will simply notice where it has gone. Perhaps it has returned to the anxieties of the marketplace or the expectations of tomorrow. Gently, without any self-reproach, bring your attention back to the breath, back to the feeling of your body, and back to the image of the clear, quiet pool. Returning is not a failure. Returning is the practice itself. It is the act of coming back to the present, over and over again. Regardless of how many times the mind tries to pull you into the performance of being someone else. You might feel a sense of relief, or you might feel a lingering tension. Both are acceptable. You are not trying to reach a destination of total emotional numbness. You are trying to find a place of grounded, honest presence. By holding these fragments of your inner life with this gentle, non-judgmental attention, you are beginning to realize that the person you are beneath the cloak is not defined by their social utility, but by their capacity to simply be. You are the host of this quiet space. Take another slow, deep breath, and as you exhale, imagine the surface of the pool becoming perfectly still. The ripples caused by your worries are beginning to subside. The brooch is still there, beneath the surface, but it no longer has the power to dictate how you carry your shoulders or how you speak. You are becoming the witness, the one who watches the cloak lie on the floor, rather than the one who is frantically trying to drape it back over their skin. You are the space that remains when the performing stops. If you feel a sense of heaviness, let that be there too. Do not try to lift it. Let the floor beneath you carry it. You have been holding so much for so long, trying to keep the structure of your public self upright through the sheer force of your own vigilance. But you are not the cloak, and you are not the embroidery. You are the human being who has finally realized that the temple courtyard is safe, and that the ground beneath your feet is more than enough. As you continue to breathe, allow the image of the pool to fade, but keep the sense of space you have created. You can return to this practice whenever you feel the urge to tighten your grip, whenever you feel the need to prove your worth through appearance, or whenever the weight of others' expectations begins to feel suffocating. You are learning that your value is not a garment you must wear. It is the inherent capacity of your own consciousness to hold your life exactly as it is, without the need for constant editing or external approval. There is nothing else you need to do right now. The day is behind you, and the tomorrow is not yet here. You are currently suspended in a rare, quiet pocket of time where no demands are made upon you. The shadows in your room are deepening, moving with the slow, steady pace of the night. You are not losing time by resting. You are restoring the very core of your capacity to live. Let the jaw stay soft, let the hands remain open, and let the mind drift into the slow, rhythmic cadence of the room. You have done enough by simply choosing to sit on the stool for a while. You have been enough, and in this moment, that is the only truth that matters. And as we prepare to move even deeper into this evening, keep that sense of lightness with you, because there is still more to discover about the freedom of the unadorned self. In a province where the valleys were often filled with a thick, clinging gray mist, there lived a woman named Emi who served as the keeper of the mountain pass. Her duty was to maintain a small stone way station for travelers, providing a warm hearth and a place to mend their travel-worn gear. Emi lived with a deep, private wound. She felt that her own life was like the pass itself, exposed to every storm, battered by the changing seasons, and ultimately destined to be empty once the travelers moved on. She carried an old, hollowed-out bamboo reed, a simple, slender object that she used to blow air into the dying embers of the hearth to Emi. This reed was the symbol of her own existence, hollow, fragile, and useful only as long as there was a flame to tend. She spent her nights in a state of hypervigilance, listening to the wind and fearing that her own fire would fail, that she would be found wanting when a traveler arrived in need of shelter. Her anxiety was a constant companion, a secondary voice that whispered, "If the fire goes out, you have no purpose." She believed that she was the protector of the flame, and if the flame ever faltered, she would be exposed as nothing more than a hollow reed, incapable of providing warmth or safety. She did not realize that her constant effort to control the fire, to feed it, to shield it, to obsess over its intensity, was the very thing that made her feel so brittle and thin. One evening, a wandering tea master arrived at the way station, seeking refuge from a sudden, fierce mountain gale. He was a man who moved with the unhurried grace of the mountain itself, his presence filling the small stone room with a stillness that Emi found both grounding and terrifying. As he sat by the fire, he watched Emi work. She was frantic, her hands trembling as she adjusted the logs, her lips pursed around the bamboo reed, blowing hard and steady into the heart of the embers to keep them bright. The tea master did not speak for a long time. He simply watched, his eyes reflecting the dance of the firelight. After the storm had subsided, he took the bamboo reed from Emi's hand. He did not blow into it. He stood and walked to the door, stepping out into the cold, clear air of the mountain pass. Emi followed him, her heart racing, fearing he was discarding her tool, her lifeline, her very means of serving others. He stopped at a patch of frozen, wind-blown ground and knelt, using the end of the bamboo reed to clear a small, circular space in the snow. Then he looked up at the stars, bright and piercing in the high altitude, and handed the reed back to her. "The hearth fire is a visitor," the tea master said, his voice barely rising above the whistle of the wind. "It comes and it goes. The mountain is the host. You have been acting as if the fire is the owner of this house, and you its fearful servant. But look at the stars. Do they fear the wind? Do they struggle to remain bright?" Emi looked at the reed in her hand. It felt cold, stiff, and lifeless in the night air. She realized that she had been trying to hold the fire as if it were a possession, as if she could hoard the heat and force the world to remain warm through her own sheer, exhausting vigilance. The tea master reached out and placed his hand gently over hers, covering the bamboo reed. "You are not the fire, Emi. You are the space where the fire happens to be for a while. When you stop trying to own the flame, you can finally feel the warmth of the hearth yourself." Emi stood there for a long time, the cold seeping into her robes, yet feeling a strange, hollowed-out lightness in her chest. For years she had been defined by the intensity of the flame. She realized that her suffering, the anxiety that tightened her throat whenever the wind rose, was the result of trying to be the source of light in a world that was already vast and illuminated. She had been treating her own life as a scarce resource to be protected at all costs, rather than as a part of a larger natural unfolding. That night, she did not return to the hearth and immediately begin to blow into the embers. She sat on the stone floor, away from the fireplace, and simply watched the fire as it naturally ebbed and flowed. She noticed that the logs shifted, that the smoke curled into patterns she had never observed before, and that the heat moved through the room regardless of whether she was actively fueling it or not. She felt the urge to stand, to fix, to adjust, to prove her worth through labor, but she chose, for the first time, to remain seated. This was her transformation. Not a grand, miraculous change in the weather of the mountain, but a small, deliberate act of surrender. She breathed a long, slow, jagged breath and decided to let the fire be exactly as it was. It dimmed. The room grew cooler, but Emmy did not die. The way station did not collapse. The mountain did not vanish. She realized that the hollow nature of the reed was not a defect as she had always assumed. It was, in fact, the only thing that allowed it to carry the breath. Had the reed been solid, it could never have served its purpose. Her own emptiness, which she had fought so hard to hide, was the very capacity she needed to hold the space for others. The next morning when the tea master departed, he did not take the reed. He left it on the hearth. Emmy picked it up, but she did not use it to strike the fire. She placed it on the mantel, where it became a simple, quiet reminder of the previous night. She found that throughout the day, as travelers passed through the gate, she no longer felt the need to apologize for the cold, or to perform a frantic, artificial warmth. She welcomed them with a quiet, steady presence that felt more like the mountain itself than the flickering, anxious flame. She still tended the fire. Of course, that was the work of the way station, but she did so with a different rhythm. She worked with the wood, not against the wind. She noticed when the fire was low and added a log. But she did not feel the surge of panic that once accompanied the cooling embers. She understood now that the fire was a guest, and her role was simply to be the host, not the owner. The anxiety that had once defined her life began to feel like a distant echo, something that belonged to a person she used to know, a person who was terrified of being hollow. The deeper insight that settled into Emmy's heart was that we are all, in our own way, hollow reeds. We spend our lives trying to stuff ourselves with achievements, with praise, with the warmth of others' approval, fearing that if we are empty, we are nothing. But the Zen wisdom of the mountain taught her that the emptiness is not a void to be filled. It is the space that makes us capable of connecting to the world. It is the hollow center of the reed that allows the breath to move through it and become music. It is the open palm that can receive, and the open hearth that can share. Emmy's transformation was subtle. She did not become a saint, and the winds continued to lash against the mountain pass. She still faced days where the wood was damp, the fire was stubborn, and the travelers were demanding. But she had ceased the practice of treating her own inner state as a disaster. When a thought of inadequacy arose, when the old whisper returned, telling her she was not doing enough, she no longer fought it. She did not try to fix her own feelings as if they were a faulty chimney. She treated her thoughts like the travelers passing through the gate. She offered them a place to sit, a moment of rest, and then she allowed them to continue on their way. She learned that the suffering was never about the fire. It was about the way she had identified herself with the flame, thinking that if the flame failed, she failed. By loosening that grip, by acknowledging that she was the way station and not the heat, she found a level of peace she had never imagined possible. She slept deeper, she breathed easier, and she moved through her daily tasks with a kind of economy of effort that was entirely new. She was no longer a servant to her own anxiety. She was the mountain, steady and indifferent to the passing storms. As you reflect on Emmy's journey tonight, consider your own version of the hollow reed. What is the thing you are trying so hard to keep burning, even when your hands are tired? What is the version of performance you believe you must maintain to be worthy of your seat at the hearth? You do not need to let the fire go out, and you do not need to abandon your responsibilities. You only need to change your posture toward them. You can be the hearth. You can be the way station, without needing to be the flame itself. There is a profound, quiet relief in realizing that your worth is not a constant, high-intensity burn you must maintain for the benefit of the world. You are allowed to be cooler sometimes. You are allowed to be less than radiant. You are allowed to simply exist in the space you occupy. The world will not break because you have decided to stop frantically blowing into the embers of your own exhaustion. The mountain is still there, beneath the snow, immovable and patient. Your breath, which has been used for so much striving, can now be used for the simple, quiet act of being here, in this room, in this night. This is the deeper practice, to stand in the doorway of your own life and welcome whatever weather comes. knowing that you are the space in which all of it occurs. The thoughts are just the wind. The emotions are just the shifting light of the embers. And you the witness, the way station. You are the foundation that remains. As you feel the weight of your own body settling deeper into the mattress, imagine that you are leaving the hearth, leaving the work, and moving into the vast, calm space of the mountain pass. The night is deep. The stars are cold and clear, and there is nowhere else you need to be. You are not a fire that must be tended. You are the earth, and you are already perfectly enough. The reality of your suffering is far less complex than your mind suggests. Yet it feels impenetrable because you are looking at it through the lens of a merchant who believes his indigo wool is his skin. When you feel that tightening in your chest, that subtle, persistent anxiety about how you are being perceived, or that hollow dread that your internal resources are dwindling, it is almost always because you have stepped out of your own life and into the role of an observer who is perpetually critiquing your performance. You have turned your awareness against yourself. You have taken the capacity for reflection and used it to construct a fortress of shame, believing that if you can just anticipate every mistake, if you can just rehearse every potential social slight, you will finally be safe. But safety is not the byproduct of control. It is the natural consequence of letting go. The mechanism behind your exhaustion is a desperate, habitual resistance to the present moment. Think of how often you find yourself trying to solve a social friction that happened weeks ago, or attempting to predict a future interaction with someone whose heart you cannot possibly know. You are trying to act as a scribe for a story that is currently being written by 1,000 moving parts. You are trying to seize the pen and force the narrative to be flawless, to be consistent, to be admired. This is the mechanism of control, a frantic, exhausting attempt to create a static world out of a fluid one. When you judge yourself, you are not refining your character. You are sewing extra weights into your cloak. You are convinced that your flaws are the reason you are tired, but your fatigue is actually caused by the effort of hiding those very flaws. The Buddhist insight here is remarkably liberating. The first pain, the original sensation of being tired, or awkward, or unsure, or lonely, is simply a fact of existence. It is the cold air of the mountain path. It is the texture of human reality. But the second pain, the one that keeps you awake, is the layer of judgment you pour over that initial fact. It is the inner critic that says, "I should not feel this way," or "if I were truly capable, I would have handled that differently." This second pain is a construction of the mind, not a requirement of life. It is the voice that insists you must be a seamless, perfect artifact rather than a breathing human. And here is the paradox. You cannot always control the first pain. You cannot always choose when you feel tired, when you feel out of place, or when the weight of social expectation feels too much to carry. You cannot always order the wind to cease blowing, but you can stop feeding the second pain. You can choose to stop adding the judgment. When you feel that familiar pang of inadequacy, you can look at it with the same calm neutrality you would show a traveler passing through the courtyard. You can offer it a seat. You can see it for what it is, and then you can let it continue on its way without inviting it to move into your heart. Peace is not the absence of these difficult sensations. If you wait until you are no longer tired, no longer awkward, or no longer feeling the sting of self-consciousness before you allow yourself to be at peace, you will wait until the end of your days. Peace is a different relationship with the difficulty. It is the ability to acknowledge the fatigue and the awkwardness, to see the urge to perform, and to simply say, "I see you, but I do not have to be governed by you." It is the act of stepping off the stool, leaving the heavy, ornate cloak on the stone, and walking toward the hearth with nothing but your own unadorned presence. You have turned your pain into an identity because you believe that if you aren't carrying this burden, you won't have a map for who you are. You worry that if you aren't obsessing over your social standing or your internal shortcomings, you will lose your way. This is the fear of uncertainty acting as a protective mask. But what if the you who survives the shedding of that mask is not empty? What if the you who remains is the very thing you have been looking for all along, the witness, the quiet observer, the one who does not need to adjust the silver thread to be whole? Consider how often you try to fix yourself through the medium of shame. You think if I can just make myself feel bad enough about this, I won't do it again. But shame is a stagnant, heavy energy. It does not cleanse the heart, it obscures it. It keeps you trapped in the marketplace, worrying about how the wares are arranged, while the real life, the life of the mountain, the life of the hearth, the life of the quiet, beating heart is happening somewhere else. You can choose a different discipline, the discipline of noticing. When you notice a thought, you are creating a sacred gap. You are saying, I am the space where this thought is appearing. If the thought says you are unworthy, you do not have to argue with it, and you certainly do not have to believe it. You can simply notice that a thought of unworthiness has appeared, like a cloud passing through the sky. You are the sky. You are not the cloud. You are not the thought. You are the vast, enduring capacity for awareness that remains when the thoughts are finished. This shift in relationship is the foundation of deep, restorative rest. It means that when you feel the pull of old patterns, that reflexive urge to apologize, to smooth over, to manage the room, you can recognize it as an old garment trying to reattach itself to your shoulders. You can gently unfasten it. You can acknowledge that you are tired of wearing it. And you can give yourself the permission to simply stand in the cool, honest air of your own existence. This is not about becoming a stranger to your own humanity. It is about becoming a friend to it. It is about accepting the fact that you are a way station, and that the travelers, the thoughts, the feelings, the memories, the doubts have every right to pass through, but they have no right to govern the house. You are moving away from the marketplace of expectations and into the inner temple of your own being. This is a journey that takes place in the small, quiet moments of your day. It happens when you are waiting in line and you notice yourself preparing a version of yourself to present to the cashier. It happens when you are in a meeting and you realize you are holding your breath because you are afraid of appearing unready. In these moments, you have a choice. You can tighten the cloak, or you can take a breath. You can perform, or you can be present. Each time you choose the breath, each time you choose the presence, you are loosening the seams of the old garment. You are not failing because you haven't mastered this yet. You are a person who has spent a long time in the cold, and it is natural to want the comfort of the cloak. But tonight you are being invited to experience something different. You are being invited to see that the warmth you seek is not in the wool, it is in the fire that you have been shielding from yourself. You are the hearth. The heat is already here. It is yours by birthright, not by achievement. As you lie here, listen to the way your own pulse beats a steady, unpretentious rhythm. It does not need a cloak. It does not need an audience. It does not need to be refined. It is simply quietly alive. This is the truth of your existence, and it is the only thing that needs to be true tonight. You can stop solving the problems of the day. You can stop replaying the mistakes. You can stop managing your image. You can finally truly stop. The night is deep, and it is asking for nothing from you. It is merely providing the space for you to discover the person you were before you learned, to wear the heavy silver-threaded weight of the world. And you are going to find that this person is far more resilient, far more peaceful, and far more worthy of rest than you ever imagined. This wisdom does not require you to retreat to a secluded mountain tower, or to abandon the rhythms of your modern life. It is designed for the moments when you are standing in the middle of the crowded day, feeling the pull of 100 competing demands. You can practice this whenever you feel the urge to tighten your grip on the outcome of a conversation, or when you find yourself checking your phone for reassurance, hoping that someone else's words will provide the steady ground you haven't yet learned to cultivate within yourself. Consider the times when you are waiting for a message, waiting for a sign, waiting for a breakthrough that will finally tell you that you are on the right path. This waiting is a form of the secondary wound. You have taken the first reality, which is simply that you are in a period of transition, and you have added the layer of anxious polishing, imagining that if you think about the outcome hard enough, you can force the glass to become clear. But a breath taken before you check your device, a moment of sensing your feet on the ground before you react to the pressure, is a profound form of wisdom. It is the small, quiet act of choosing to be the host of the room rather than the custodian of the view. When you lie awake in the dark, replaying a mistake you made years ago, or analyzing an interaction that felt slightly off. Remember that you are not replaying the past. You are replaying a memory, and you are treating it as if it were a present threat. The mind loves to do this. It thinks it is protecting you by keeping the mistake front and center, hoping that if it dwells on the error long enough, it will finally uncover the solution that was missed. But the solution to the past is to stop living in it. You can acknowledge the regret. You can feel the sting of the memory. And then you can notice that you are currently lying in a safe room, breathing air that is not contaminated by that long-gone event. You can give yourself permission to stop the audit. Many of us go through our days smiling while we feel a profound heaviness inside, fearing that if we were to let the mask slip, we would be seen as burdens. We think that being enough means being constant, consistent, and endlessly cheerful. We feel guilty for the moments when we simply need to exist without being productive. But you do not need to earn your right to rest. You do not need to demonstrate your worth through a display of unceasing strength. The window in the tower did not have to earn its right to remain fogged. It was simply a part of the house. You are a part of the house of this life, and you have as much right to the stillness as the mountain pass has. You can care deeply about the people in your life without needing to grip the outcome of those relationships so tightly that you crush them. You can show up for your friends, your family, and your work with presence and kindness. But you can also recognize when you are sliding into the territory of control. When you find yourself worrying that someone else is not behaving exactly as you hoped, or when you feel the fear that a bond is fraying, pause and notice the sensation of that grip. Ask yourself, am I trying to protect this person, or am I trying to protect my own sense of security? When you can name the fear, you take the power away from it. You can then reach out from a place of connection rather than a place of desperate clutching. Comparing your life to the lives of others is another habit that feeds the secondary wound. We see the polished, curated surfaces of other people's experiences, and we mistakenly assume that their internal lives are just as smooth and illuminated. We look at our own rough edges, our own moments of doubt, and we conclude that we are the only ones struggling. This is the loneliness of the person with the cloth. It is the belief that everyone else is a finished vessel while you are still being shaped. But everyone you see is also struggling with their own version of the window. Everyone is also trying to see through the mist, and everyone is also feeling the cold at times. You are not an outlier. You are in the middle of the human experience. If you find yourself feeling behind in life, as if you have missed a deadline that doesn't actually exist, try to notice the story you are telling yourself about time. The clock is a useful tool for organizing the day, but it is a poor instrument for measuring the soul. You are not an object that is being built on an assembly line. You are an unfolding process. You are the tower, the valley, and the breath. These things do not move according to the frantic pace of the digital world. They move with the season. There is a deep, radical patience required to live this way, but it is the only way to live without burning yourself out. You don't need to be perfect to be worthy of your own compassion. You don't need to have all the answers to be allowed to go to sleep. When you feel the weight of your own perceived failures, you can treat them like the mist passing through the pass. They have a story. They have a heavy load. They have a reason for being there. But they are not the house. They are the guests. You can offer them hospitality. You can acknowledge your struggles. But you do not have to move them into the living room of your heart and make them the center of your life. You can let them pass through. There is a form of discipline that is not about self-punishment or the harsh correction of your habits. It is the discipline of returning to the present moment. It is the quiet commitment to notice when you have drifted into the future and to simply, without any drama or shame, return to the feeling of your body in the bed. It is the discipline of saying, I am here, and for this moment that is all that is required. This is not a passive act. It is a radical choice to stop feeding the machinery of your own suffering. As you navigate the next few days, see if you can catch yourself in the middle of the old patterns. Notice the impulse to explain yourself to others when no one asked for an explanation. Notice the way your breath hitches when you think about your responsibilities. Notice the way you apologize for your own needs. Just notice. You don't have to fix these things yet. You don't have to overhaul your entire way of being. Just noticing the pattern is the first step toward loosening its grip. When you notice, you create a tiny, infinitesimal space between you and the habit. That space is where the wisdom lives. That space is where the window opens up. You are learning to treat yourself with the same dignity that you would offer a guest who arrives at your way station in the middle of a storm. You wouldn't throw them out into the wind. You wouldn't demand that they stop shivering immediately. You would offer them a warm place to sit. You would let them recover in their own time. Treat your own mind with that same grace tonight. If you are cold, let yourself be cold. If you are tired, let yourself be tired. If you are struggling with a thought that feels too sharp to handle, don't try to hide it. Just hold it gently and let the space around it be enough. This is the way to live when you stop trying to be the polisher. You become the host. You become the room. And in that room, there is enough space for everything you are currently holding. You have spent so much energy trying to be the source of clarity, believing that if you dimmed, the world would go dark. But the world is already filled with light, and you are a part of it, not the generator of it. You are the space where the light exists, and that is a beautiful, necessary, and sufficient way to be. The quiet isn't a sign that you have stopped working. It is a sign that you have finally understood the nature of the work. You are tending the hearth of your own existence, and the light will shine as bright as it needs to for this night. You don't have to watch it. You don't have to wipe the glass. You don't have to worry about the smudge. You can finally lay your head down, knowing that the valley will still be there in the morning, and that you have done exactly what was asked of you today. You have been present, you have been open, and you have allowed yourself to be exactly the human being you are. And that is enough. The observation tower has grown quiet, and the wind that once rattled the stone masonry has settled into a soft, steady hum. The coarse, dry cloth, the tool that defined the stone scrubber's days and dictated the frantic rhythm of his hands, now lies abandoned on the floor, forgotten in the dimming light. It is no longer a necessity. It is no longer a weapon of self-correction. It is merely a scrap of fabric, resting on the cold floor, losing its utility to the patience of the evening. You have spent so much of your life scrubbing the glass, believing that without the constant polishing, without the intense scrutiny, and without the transparent silhouette you spent years perfecting, you would be lost to the fog. But look at the space around you. Feel the way the room supports your form. You are not the glass. You are not the smudge. You are not the list of tasks, the apologies you have prepared, or the worries you have rehearsed. You are the quiet awareness that has been watching the window from the safety of the sanctuary. Let your limbs grow heavy as the ancient stone floor of the tower. There is no need for your shoulders to remain braced, no need for your jaw to remain set. Those were muscles of protection, built to keep the viewing going. But here, in the dim amber light of the inner room, they can finally dissolve. Let the muscles of your face melt. Let the space behind your eyes widen and go soft. You have arrived at the threshold of the unadorned self, and you are welcome here. The breath that moves in and out of your chest is not a tool for clarity. It is not an invitation for your mind to analyze its own quality, nor is it a means of proving your worth. It is a private, ancient rhythm that links you to the valley, the mist, and the deep, dark pulse of the night. Feel how that breath does not ask for permission to exist. It simply flows. It is the steady drip of condensation against the window pane, clearing away the need to define the view, to reveal the stillness that was always there, untouched and unblemished. There is a profound, quiet relief in recognizing that you can be honest about your own exhaustion. You can stop pretending that the glass isn't fogged. You can acknowledge in the silence of this moment that you are tired of the constant, flickering labor of being clear. There is no audience here. There is only the cool, honest air of your own existence. This honesty is not an act of surrender. It is the most courageous movement you have made all day. It is the moment you step away from the window and walk into the warmth of the inner chamber, leaving the dry cloth to the mercy of the floor. As the shadows lengthen, let the thoughts that were so loud only an hour ago drift toward the doorway, like guests who have realized the evening has ended. You do not need to follow them. You do not need to see where they go or wonder if they will return. You are not responsible for the contents of the valley, and you are not responsible for the opinions of the wind. You are only responsible for this one, singular, precious breath. You are only responsible for the weight of your own body settling into the softness of the bed. Everything that needed to be done has been completed. Every interaction has had its turn. Every worry has been seen, and every attempt at perfection has finally reached its curtain call. The stage is dark now. The theater of the scrutinizing self is quiet, and the only thing left is the simple, honest presence of your own life, stripped of the need to be transparent. It feels different here, doesn't it? It feels lighter, more spacious, as if the walls of the room have expanded to hold the truth of who you are, without the need for visual proof. Let your awareness sink into the deep, dark velvet of the night. It is safe here, it is cool here, it is entirely, utterly silent. The mountain path is long, but you have found the tower. The mist is thick, but you have found the center of the room. You do not need to be the source of the view, to be worthy of the sanctuary. You are the vessel that holds the space, and that is a beautiful, necessary, and sufficient way to exist. There is no tomorrow to solve tonight. The future is an idea that has no weight in this darkness. The past is a dream that has no authority in this room. There is only the sensation of your body being supported, the feeling of the breath moving through the hollow center of your being, and the slow, beautiful fading of the light. You can trust this fading. You can trust the silence. You can trust the fact that you are already, perfectly, exactly who you are, beneath all the patterns you have been trying to scrub. The window remains, but the wiping has ended. The condensation runs in slow, natural paths down the glass, and you the witness, the way station. You are the foundation that remains. As the last remnants of the day fall away like dry leaves from a tree, you are finally free to let the monitoring end. You are finally free to stop being the one who tends the view, and simply be the one who rests in the stillness of the room. If the clarity you have been searching for was never something you had to wipe into existence, but the quiet willingness to finally leave the glass alone, what would it feel like to stop looking for the horizon and let the dark hold you instead?